In the autumn of 1980, a thunderous clash began on the dusty plains and marshes between two proud nations. What would become one of the 20th century's longest and bloodiest conflicts ignited along the contested banks of the Shatt al-Arab waterway, spiraling into an 8-year war that reshaped the Middle East. This is the story of the Iran-Iraq War. The Iran-Iraq War did not erupt in a vacuum. Tensions between Baghdad and Tehran had smoldered for decades, fueled by territorial disputes, ethnic rivalries, and ideological antagonism. The Shatt al-Arab, where the Tigris and Euphrates rivers converge and flow into the Persian Gulf, was more than a vital shipping lane. It was a symbol of sovereignty and pride. In 1975, under international pressure, the two countries signed the Algiers Agreement. Iraq recognized Iran's sovereignty over the eastern half of the waterway. In return, Iran abandoned its support for Iraqi Kurds. But for Saddam Hussein, then vice president of Iraq's Ba'athist regime, the accord was an ignoble compromise, a humiliation to be reversed. The balance shifted irrevocably with Iran's 1979 revolution. The overthrow of the Shah and the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini inaugurated a theocratic republic, determined to export its revolutionary zeal across the region. For Saddam, ruling over a Sunni minority controlling a Shia majority, this represented an existential threat. Throughout 1979 and early 1980, Iraq and Iran engaged in provocative exchanges, border skirmishes, aerial incursions, and paramilitary clashes. Saddam tightly controlled his military, restructuring it to ensure loyalty. In Tehran, the revolutionary leadership purged the army of officers whose allegiance to the Shah was suspect. Iran's armed forces lay in disarray, its command fractured between the regular Artesh and the newly formed Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, or Pasdaran. By late summer 1980, both capitals believed opportunity lay with the other's weakness. Saddam calculated that Iran's internal chaos, its battered economy, and the Islamic Republic's isolation would enable a swift victory. On 22 September, Iraqi forces swept across the border, seizing towns in Khuzestan province and bombarding oil installations along the Shatt. Iraq's opening gambit mirrored 20th century mechanized warfare. Dense armored columns backed by airstrikes, aiming for a rapid breakthrough. Baghdad's troops advanced on Khorramshahr and Abadan, hoping to carve off Iran's oil heartland and force a swift capitulation. Early gains gave rise to triumphant radio broadcasts in Baghdad, but the momentum stalled at the gates of Iranian resistance. Iran's response, though raw and improvised, was ferocious. Besieged militias, volunteer fighters inspired by revolutionary fervor, joined regular units. The nascent IRGC, despite lack of heavy weaponry, provided ideological motivation and guerrilla tactics. In bitter house-to-house fights, the defenders repelled the invaders from Khorramshahr by the end of November 1980. By March 1981, Iraqi forces were pushed back across the frontier. What began as a desperate defense transformed into a counteroffensive. In spring 1982, Iran's commanders, emboldened by success, rejected United Nations ceasefire proposals and ordered an advance into Iraqi territory. The recapture of Khorramshahr became a national triumph, broadcast across Iranian radio and television as a proof of revolutionary prowess. Yet, as Iranian troops pressed forward, aims escalated from border defense to regime change. The war's character shifted. It was no longer a border skirmish, but an ideological crusade. Columns of Pasdaran units streamed into southern Iraqi marshes, intent on toppling Saddam's secular Ba'athist regime. Baghdad, alarmed by the existential threat, shored up defenses around Basra, Iraq's southern gateway. By mid-1982, the front lines stabilized. Both sides dug in, constructing elaborate trench systems in desert sands and battleground villages. The war entered a grim phase of attrition reminiscent of World War I. Iranian offensives, often relying on human wave assaults by Basiji volunteers, battered Iraqi defenses at tremendous cost. Baghdad responded with ever more sophisticated countermeasures: minefields, barbed wire entanglements, and artillery barrages. Major operations, Ramadan, Muharram, Fath al-Mubin, delivered only marginal territorial gains at the price of tens of thousands of casualties. Iran's youthful volunteers, many barely in their teens, charged across no man's land, spurred by promises of martyrdom. Iraqi troops, equipped with Soviet T-72 tanks and MiG aircraft, withstood the onslaught, though suffered grievous losses themselves. As battlefield opportunities waned, the conflict spilled beyond trenches into heartlands and high seas. Three interlinked campaigns define this totalization of war. First, the tanker war section erupted in 1984. Both navies attacked merchant shipping in the Persian Gulf, seeking to strangle the other's economy. Iran's Revolutionary Guard speedboats launched missile strikes. Iraq's Air Force bombed oil platforms. The United States, tasked with protecting global oil supplies, deployed warships to escort tankers, a direct foreign intervention in the conflict. Second, the War of the Cities commenced in 1984 as Iraq fired Scud and Al-Hussein missiles at Tehran, Shiraz, and other urban centers. Iran retaliated with modified Soviet Katyusha rockets, though lacking range and accuracy. The psychological toll was immense. Civilians huddled in shelters as sirens wailed, schools closed, and daily life became a struggle against terror. Third and most appalling was the use of chemical weapons. Beginning in 1983, Iraq unleashed mustard gas, tabun, and sarin against Iranian forces massed in trenches. The most horrific atrocity came in March 1988 at Halabja, where Kurdish civilians were gassed en masse. By war's end, estimates suggest Iraq deployed chemical agents on hundreds of occasions, inflicting lasting injuries and deaths on both soldiers and civilians. Throughout the war, superpowers and regional actors stoked the flames. The Soviet Union and France sold arms to Baghdad. The United States provided intelligence and satellite imagery. Saudi Arabia and Kuwait funneled billions of dollars to Iraq, fearing the spread of Iran's Shia revolution. Conversely, Iran, isolated and sanctioned, turned to covert procurement networks in North Korea, China, and even clandestine Israeli channels, a paradox underscored by the Iran-Contra affair. By 1987, exhaustion gripped both capitals. War-fatigued soldiers and civilians yearned for peace, yet pride and ideological conviction delayed negotiations. Finally, United Nations Security Council Resolution 598 achieved acceptance from both sides. On the 20th of August 1988, a ceasefire froze the battle lines. The map returned to its 1980 contours. Neither state achieved its maximalist goals. When the guns fell silent, the human and economic toll was staggering. Combined military and civilian deaths number between 500,000 to 700,000. Iran's economy lay crippled. Oil fields damaged, cities in ruins. Iraq, laden with debt, saw its ambitions thwarted. Its dictatorship emboldened but isolated, sowing the seeds for the invasion of Kuwait just 2 years later. The war's legacy endures. Iran's Revolutionary Guard emerged as a powerful political and economic force, shaping doctrines of asymmetric warfare that resonate today in proxy conflicts across the Middle East. Saddam Hussein's regime, having used chemical weapons with impunity, became a pariah, yet resisted accountability until his downfall in 2003. The Sunni-Shia divide deepened, fueling sectarian strife from Lebanon to Yemen. For contemporary conflicts, from urban battles to hybrid warfare, the Iran-Iraq war offers stark lessons. That total war consumes not only armies, but entire societies. That ideological zeal can drive tragic losses. And that diplomatic compromise, once forsaken, is hard to restore. Above all, it reminds us that the human costs of war often outlast the political blemishes they were meant to erase. 8 years of blood and steel, ending not in triumph, but exhaustion. The Iran-Iraq war stands as a testament to the dangers of unresolved disputes and unrestrained ambition. A lesson for all who would wage modern war. If this deep dive into the Iran-Iraq war resonated with you, please subscribe and enable notifications so you never miss our historical analyses. Share your thoughts below. What lessons from this conflict do you believe still shape today's geopolitics?